All right, folks, buckle up. This may be one of the most controversial videos I've ever done, and that's saying a lot given some of the flack I've taken online for some of my content. People are unbelievably tribally loyal to their ballistic solver of choice. And a while back, when Hornady 4DOF kind of first came on the market, I realized I didn't understand a whole lot about ballistic solvers, the math behind it, the physics behind it. So what we're going to do today is a head-to-head comparison between the Hornady 4DOF and the Applied Ballistics solvers. So the plan is to break this video up into 5 different segments: physics modeling, drag models, real-world accuracy, ecosystem, and cost. So I'm going to try and keep this as simple and straightforward as possible, not just for you, but for myself. I'm not a physicist and I'm not a mathematician, so I'm going to do my best to share the synthesis that I've pulled together. So let's start with Applied Ballistics. Now, AB is a point mass solver that employs 3 degrees of freedom. And if you ever wondered what 4DOF stood for in Hornady, it's 4 degrees of freedom, 4DOF. And we're going to get to that in a moment. Now, in a standard 3DOF model, the object is treated as a simple point in space with mass and velocity. The 3 degrees of freedom refers to forward and backward, up and down, left and right. One of the issues with a 3 degree of freedom calculation or equation is that it does not account for rotational inconsistencies in the point. It treats it as a single point in space, not a conical object that has angle and rotation. Now, the AB team has enhanced the algorithm or the math that AB is using to model the flight of the bullet with a bunch of stuff layered on top, but it is not actually calculating changes in that object that occupies that point in space. It's like a second layer. It's not calculated on first principles of the object itself. Hornady has actually claimed that the 4DOF model is the first model that intrinsically calculates for things like spindrift and aerodynamic jump without the need for a second layer of math on top like AB uses. All right, let's talk drag models. Now this gets a little bit in depth, so again, I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. We basically have 2 competing approaches. We have BC and we have Doppler radar. So a BC, or a ballistic coefficient, depending on which model you use, G1 or G7, could be based on modeling that is over 150 years old. And basically the BC is a projected model. It is not based in reality. It is based on projecting or predicting what an object of a given mass will do if shot at a given velocity. And so it inherently has flaws, especially when we get into the much newer bullets. Like this would be considered a VLD bullet or a very low drag bullet. This is a 147 ELDM. It is actually a very long and very narrow bullet that has a very high BC. The problem with BCs is that they tend to fall off in accuracy once you get out past 600 yards. We're going to get into truing our dope or truing our data in a minute. But just remember, BC is a mathematical model that is trying to predict what a bullet will do. It is not based on directly observing what the bullet does do. So that leads us into Doppler radar, called a custom curve function or a custom Doppler model. And what they actually do is set up a radar and physically map the flight of the bullet itself. Now, AB and Hornady do this slightly differently, and that's why there's such a difference in the amount of bullets available. Now, Applied Ballistics will radar the entire flight path of the bullet. but I'm fairly certain what they actually do is they take 12 points of data or 12 samples along the flight path, and then they interpolate the entire flight path out of that. Now, Hornady does that, but it also does a full physical modeling of all the properties of the bullet itself. This includes mass properties, center of gravity, aerodynamic coefficients, and the physical dimensions. Now, this is much more labor intensive and takes a lot longer, which is why I think you have a total of maybe 850 bullets available with custom curves in most Applied Ballistics Elite based softwares, and you only have maybe 100 or 150 bullets available in the Hornady 4DOF system. So just to recap that a little bit, we have two basic ways to model the flight of a bullet. We have BC, which is a mathematical prediction not based on physical observations. And then we have Doppler radared physical observation of actual bullets flying through the air. And then within that, we have the applied ballistics approach, which is like more bullets, less data, versus the Hornady approach, which is fewer bullets, but more labor intensive because they're capturing much more data points per flight path. All right, up next, let's talk about real world accuracy and the implication of these two systems. Because I will say, whichever system you use, and then within that system, whether you choose to use a BC or a custom curve from Doppler radar, if you are inside of 400 or 500 yards, you are likely not going to see a noticeable difference. So I'm probably just going to tell you to use whichever one you're most comfortable with. However, when you start shooting out past 600, 800, 1,000 yards, all of a sudden differences do become apparent. And for me, they became apparent in two different ways. One of the systems tended to be closer to my bullet's natural flight path without me making any adjustments whatsoever. And then the way you make those adjustments in one of the systems seemed to provide a much more reliable output at the end of the day. So what we're talking about in that situation is called truing your data. And you have a bunch of different options for truing data. You can adjust the curve, you can adjust the axial form factor, you can adjust the muzzle velocity, you can adjust the BC, and there are pros and cons to all of these. So I was just on a shooting course. I had my gun set up with Applied Ballistics. I was using the Sig BDX app. I started shooting things at 1,400 yards, and I needed to true my data. So I looked at how much I needed to do, and I applied the correction in the Sig BDX app. If you choose to use the custom curve, the only thing you can adjust is your muzzle velocity. The problem with adjusting your muzzle velocity is the correction that applies to the flight path of your bullet will not remain consistent at different elevations and temperatures because it creates a different pressure. And so the velocity has a different intensity of impact on the flight path of the bullet. Now, if you choose to use BC instead of custom curve, you can increase or decrease your BC to account for your bullet being high or low at those distances. Then I started all over from scratch, started a fresh dope within Hornady 4DOF, and did it again. Right away, I noticed I was only about half the distance out at 1,400 yards than I was with the Applied Ballistics. And I'm not going to say Hornady 4DOF was better. I just know that for my particular setup, at that particular situation, the 4DOF model gave a prediction that was closer to reality than Applied Ballistics did. The second thing is it allows you to adjust axial form factor, which does not adjust the muzzle velocity. It will increase or decrease the amount of drag in the prediction so that it corrects it over the entire flight path, and it does this independent of muzzle velocity. So the correction stays true if you move to a different altitude. So the correction I had to make was smaller, and the final output gave me a prediction that was going to be more reliable in more environments. So for me, the Hornady 4DOF system seemed to be superior in that particular situation. I'm so confident that I've crafted the best performing sock for backcountry hunters that's available on the market today, that I've put together the most insane giveaway I have ever done. And this is not one of those giveaways that you see from everybody else where they went and convinced a bunch of other companies to give stuff. This is me giving directly to you. So for every $5 you spend at forgedinthebackcountry.com, and that even includes the new camo version of the forged base boxers that I just released, you will get one entry to win a custom guided hunt from Mindful Hunter Outfitting. And I am going to work with the winner to build the hunt of your dreams. We could go after black bear or mule deer in British Columbia. We could go chase mule deer with our bows in Alberta, or we could go to my leases in Mexico and hunt Coues deer in the rut with a rifle. I am extremely passionate about delivering phenomenal gear to backcountry hunters. And I truly believe that with the Forged Base Series socks, I have brought something unique and new to the market. I feel very strongly that you're gonna love this product, and I cannot wait to share the hunt of a lifetime with one lucky winner. Good luck. All right, folks, bear with me. It's been a very dense video, but we are nearing the finish line. So let's finish off by talking about ecosystem, hardware integration, and cost in general. Let's start with hardware integration. So Applied Ballistics stomps all over Hornady in this regard. They are in a lot of rangefinders, a lot of different versions of the Kestrel, a lot of range finding binoculars. Now the caveat there is depending on the model of product you buy, you might not be given access to the full elite version of the Applied Ballistics software. On the other hand, at time of publication of this video, Hornady 4DOF is only available in two pieces of hardware that I know of. There's one version of the 5700 Kestrel that will come with 4DOF, and then Leupold just released a pair of range-finding binoculars that has Hornady 4DOF baked into them. So definitely wider hardware integration for Applied Ballistics than 4DOF, but you also need to buy the ultra premium versions of those particular pieces of hardware in order to get the fully unlocked version of Applied Ballistics Elite. Whereas on both the pieces of hardware that Hornady has out right now, you get the full 4DOF capabilities in both of those. Up next, let's look at app availability. So now that Applied Ballistics has released the Quantum app, you can access the Applied Ballistics solver directly on your phone and enter in your range and all your environmental variables and get a solution directly through the app. However, it's also a pay-to-play type of situation where the more functionality and the more features you want, the more you have to pay. On the other hand, the Hornady 4DOF app is 100% completely free, and you get unfettered access to the premium, fully unlocked version of 4DOF with all of its computational capabilities for no money whatsoever. And then you can take your range and all your environmental variables and punch that into the app directly and get a 4DOF based solution for literally $0. At the end of the day, which one of these platforms would I recommend you go with? Well, I will back up a step and say, I don't think there's actually one solution for everyone. I think it depends on what you shoot and how you like to come up with your solutions, or what you like to use to capture data to inform your solutions. If you shoot a ton of Wildcat cartridges, or you are shooting bullets that are not in the 4DOF library, that basically answers your question right there, because you're going to be forced to use a BC in the 4DOF library. And I fully believe using some type of Doppler custom curve is far superior to using a BC. So if your bullet's not available, you're going to be locked into Applied Ballistics. If you really love a certain piece of hardware, like I love my Sig AK Rangefinder, that Sig BDX app only supports Applied Ballistics. So based on your hardware of choice, that might lock you into one app over the other. We haven't even gotten into WES analysis or a personalized Doppler model. Both of those are advantages to the Applied Ballistics system. Now, if you want complete, unlocked access to the premium features of a state-of-the-art solver, you probably want to go with Hornady because it's the only one who's going to give you all of its features completely for free. And if you prefer a simpler and I would argue more accurate method to true your data, I would also recommend going with the Hornady 4DOF app. So if you are newer in this journey and you are using a fairly standard modern bullet, it is going to be in the 4DOF library. So ultimately, I think this breaks down to two groups of people. Group number one has been around for a while, probably shoots a lot, is probably locked into the hardware they're already using and they've spent thousands of dollars on their rangefinder or their rangefinding binoculars. And if that's the case, you're probably just better off sticking with Applied Ballistics. If you're newer in this journey and you're not locked in to the hardware for your ballistics solver, I would personally recommend going with Hornady 4DOF. I found the interface was more user-friendly. For me, the data and solutions that it derived were much more accurate for my shooting system, and the way that it corrects and trues data seems to be more consistent and reliable across a greater variety of shooting situations. Now, there is a lot more depth to this topic, and I'm sure I'm going to get flamed in the comments from AB guys saying I left stuff out about AB, and I'm going to get flamed in the comments from guys who are going to say I left stuff about Hornady. Here's the deal. My goal is the 90% of you in the middle who just want to find a solution that works and want something reliable over the long term. So I hope you guys found some value in that video. And as always, thank you for tuning in.